Alright, then I got everything down for my Keanu costume. There's just something missing. What else do I need to completely fulfill my Keanu costume? Thanks, Keanu. Guys, I can't believe they did it. They made a quadrilogy off of that one guy from the Fortnite Season 3 Battle Pass. So after nearly a decade of this franchise starting off as a more small-scale action flick that nobody was really talking about at all at the time of its release, not until much later at least, textbook definition of a sleeper hit right there, it's quite an inspiring underdog story to just see how massive this series has become. To me, every single sequel just set the bar higher and higher for top-of-the-line stunt work and pyrotechnics. Even ever since the second movie, I was already claiming for this to be the most impressive action series we have gotten in the past decade, at least here in the West. With the first movie, this is where I feel the writers brought in a deeper sense of drama with this tragic character, if anything, because I'm sure even the writers at the time just didn't know how gigantic this series would become. So alongside the kick-ass action, they had to also bring in an engaging tale of revenge via dead wife and via dead dog. So if you're looking to see more of a character study of this particular character, I will always recommend the first one for you. With 2 and 3, I feel like this is where the writers were just not putting as much effort, or at least that much time, into John's past, but rather starting to put more emphasis on the world building of these underground assassins and just the overall lore. Just block by block establishing just new rules and just the lifestyle that these assassins have in this whole global network. At this point, it feels like it's not even like a hidden network. It feels like this is just a regular world where everyone is an assassin at this point. This alongside action sequences that just crank the scale, budget, tired stunt workers up to 11. Characters and story would now take a backseat to the action, and for what we got and for what we have now, that's okay with me. But after just the insane set pieces that we got in number 3, I feel the series has kind of slowly become a little bit of a parody of itself. At some point, it does feel like it's really pushing the limits as to what can be conceived as believable. Still badass nonetheless, but I feel with the grounded, gritty version of John we got in the first movie, it feels like the version we have now is just in ultra god mode, where he'll just never get hurt from anyone anymore as much as he did in the previous titles. Oh god, getting ahead of myself here. I'm just rambling about the entity that is John Wick as opposed to the movies that he decided to bestow upon us mortals. John Wick Chapter 4. After killing a member of the High Table, Wick must face off against a new opponent that will turn old allies into foes in pursuit to gain his freedom from his excommunicated status and finally live in peace. And of course, massive big boy spoilers for this one. So to start off with the story of this one. So I feel the deepest the narrative has ever gone in this whole franchise was always when we were learning more about John's past with his deceased wife and just his overall history among all the other supporting characters. Now I'm sure you may have noticed that this one does have the beefiest runtime as opposed to every other John Wick movie. The reason why this movie has the longest runtime in the whole franchise thus far, because much like the first John Wick, it actually does focus in again more so on John's state of mind. At this point, he's just tired of living in a world of assassins just constantly hunting him, disallowing him to have a peaceful life now. So because of the script's focus on John really getting his freedom back again, there are many scenes that do play as John's final encounterments or final conversations with many of the supporting cast that has been alongside and helping out John since the first movie. He basically has finality with them. This wasn't present in the other sequels, so it's nice to see the writers getting back into the more emotional aspects of that character that is John Wick. He's not just the killing machine entirely. We see him as that now, but he wasn't always that. Besides those aspects, how was the actual structure for the majority of this movie's runtime? I would say it just runs down like the other John Wick sequels, basically video game objectives. Eliminate X target to gain the support of X group in order for him to escape X location of an even more powerful group of X. Just like a bunch of side quests you would do in a game or main quest stuff. Straightforward, simple, but engaging for the world that we have here. Now, since Chapter 2, I honestly didn't find myself feeling as invested anymore to the drama aspect of John's life, especially his past. I feel like myself and many other people who go in to watch these movies at this point now just come here to mostly see the spectacle that is the action set pieces. So whatever means is necessary for us to get to that next action set piece, I'm all for it as long as it doesn't take too much screen time. But now the question is this an effective form of storytelling, or is this just a byproduct of this movie emphasizing its action above anything else? That is up for you to decide. And for those that do want more of a challenging, deep storytelling experience that tackles the morality mindset of an older hitman just looking to finally live at peace and find a way out of this life that will require just more bloodshed amongst friends and foes, you're not going to get as much of that in here as you would like. So now moving on to the characters. There are a lot of supporting characters in this whole franchise. Since the beginning of the franchise, John honestly had very minimal characteristics. He was kind of more so a blank slate with minimal dialogue, mostly catchy one-liners or single-word catchphrases at this point, very much in line of a majority of other action stars.
Yeah.
I feel like it's this aspect that has shaped our brains to just associate Keanu Reeves' actual personality into John Wick, since he literally looks exactly how Keanu Reeves looks in real life. So we just associate his real-life humble and gentle attitude into John, which is just equal parts ironic and hilarious, because an inner sweet being committing fatalities to this degree is just plain awesome. He's the same John he's always been, very much in line with the protagonist of a video game. Just goes along with whatever task every supporting character asks him to do, and will not show any hesitation or remorse for killing anybody. If anything, he's just become an emotionless robot. So with the returning cast, I think Ian McShane's witty yet methodical banter gives a sense of comfort and has proven to be a father-like figure to John at this point, with the amount of unconditional support he's been showing since the first movie. Lance Reddick, rest in peace. His character dies here, and his dedication to being the helping hand to Winston and John is admirable, and I don't know if production actually foresaw his death coming, or if this was all just a creepy coincidence in the script writing. Also, his character definitely had one of the coolest accents I've ever heard from any performance. Just hearing it gives me satisfaction. You know, like when you buy chips, you open it up and you get that one chip, you crunch into that one chip, that's just like the most satisfying thing ever for your mouth. That's the sensation I get when hearing Lance Reddick's character in this franchise.
Let us begin.
Laurence Fishburne takes more of a backseat in this one, so big fans of his character will definitely be disappointed to not get as much of him in this one, but he still pulls out some memorable lines, and he just really gives off the cool, crazy grunkle vibe, now being the main supplier of John with all of his utilities and everything, so kudos to him for finding peace with John and helping him with his quest. Clancy Brown was a pleasant surprise here. I had no idea he was going to be in this movie, but just knowing that behind this methodical, deep, grungy voice and intimidating exterior lies the voice of Mr. Krabs, so that's just an absolute win. Bill Skarsgård as the schemy and slimy Marquis is also a pleasant addition here, and I think he played one of the more memorable villains we've had in this franchise. Just an absolute weasel. He was just a snooty asshole who technically had more power than any other antagonist we've had in this franchise, yet he still just resorts to just having other assassins do his dirty work for him, while he just sits back living a pompous, lavish lifestyle with no definitive combat skills. It just felt like it was just straight out of a cartoon, and I was all for seeing him get what was coming to him. Also, his French accent was just so on point for me. It was also just so satisfying to listen to. God, the voice acting in this whole franchise is just so effortless. Shamir Anderson as a new track character that ranks as the highest so far in this whole series of being able to track down John Wick wherever he goes around the world, with his own love for doggos as well, so that's bonus points for sure. Surprised they haven't established a character kind of like this. They have had some other variants where they're very obsessed with Wick, but not to this degree where he's just tracking him down step by step to the point where it's a little bit creepy even. But the approach of this particular character, Tracker was his name, was just very engaging to me. What was unique about his obsession with Wick was him stalking his every move and just keeping track of the bounty on his head, not being satisfied until it's at a certain amount before he goes in for the kill. It just felt right at home with this whole franchise. Also, his eyes, holy shit. The range of emotion this man was able to display without saying a single line of dialogue was incredible. Not too common or possible with many actors, but above every other supporting character in this movie. Returning or new, Donnie Yen just absolutely stole the show for me. His combat sequences we'll get to in a minute, but his performance as a blind version of John Wick essentially was just epic. Also, Donnie Yen playing a blind character who wields a staff of some sorts really reminded me of Rogue One. His witty banter with every asshole character that gives him attitude. Also, him just not being overly serious about his blindness, and his acknowledgement that he can kick basically everybody's ass in the room without being arrogant about it just prevented him from just being another plain snarky assassin in over his head. He was a joy to watch. He was also just so effortlessly funny without being overly cheesy, and with the snippets of exposition we got from him and Wick, it was just enough to give us enough info of him, but also pertains some mystery with him. We learned that he has a history with Wick, and if anything, he's just an alternate version of Wick, just a seasoned veteran that just wants out of this world of assassins and keeps getting sucked back in because he needs to protect the ones he loves. It just reminded me that no matter how flashy and how badass these characters are, these are tragic characters, just cursed to live with their decision to join this line of work forever. So comes the element we all came for at this point, the action. Many would say at this point, this franchise is a stunt work showcase, and those people aren't wrong exactly. You've heard it 1,000 times at this point, so allow me to re-emphasize the point for the millionth time on this platform for you. The action is some of the best we have ever gotten in an action franchise in the past decade easily. At this point, I identify and remember each entry of this franchise by whatever insane or creative set piece occurred in that movie. The first one introduced the idea of just hipster nightclubs where combat will take place in. The second one has the infamous pencil kill sequence, along with the silenced pistol shootout sequence. The third one definitely came to an absolute pinnacle for me when it came to the action, with the knife room fight sequence, motorcycle chase sequences, the horse combat sequence, and the intro of doggos in combat. And I would say in certain aspects, this movie ups the ante even further, as much as we didn't think that they possibly could up the ante even more. This one definitely has sequences that are series highlights for sure. A water-based nightclub where people are raving so hard they just can't notice the carnage that's happening right next to them in the club. An insane car roundabout sequence around an historic landmark in Paris to then turn into the world's most dangerous and intense game of Frogger with guns. An overhead shot of John working room to room with dragon breath rounds, just taking out every single enemy with incendiary shotgun rounds. Fans of Dead Ops Arcade or fans of every mobile shooter will definitely nut here. And of course, combat progressing up 200 stairs twice. Many of these moments just got me and the whole theater just howling with laughter in just both the absurdity and just the overall spectacle of it all. Now, would I say the combat here topped what we got in chapter 3? To me personally, I would say no, but the approach to the set pieces here were certainly just as creative. Now, the choreography for the gun and melee combat, as awesome as it is, I do feel that a few of them did play out a bit too long in certain fights, specifically at the hotel in the beginning. And as impressive as it is that Keanu is pushing 60 and is still doing a good amount of the stunts in this whole franchise, I will not deny that it is absolutely admirable and absolutely impressive. He's a beast. With each installment, I'm noticing it's getting a little bit more clear to see that in certain scenarios or certain moments, the other martial artists he is working with are obviously much younger, probably half his age even. Therefore, they're a lot more nimble than Keanu. And for certain choreography moves, they have to manipulate the speed of their movement in order for Keanu to land his hits on them. I didn't feel this sense with Donnie Yen's character. The man is also pushing 60, but he was moving just as fast, if not faster, than his co-martial artists. And since he was blind, his combat scenarios introduced were so creative. Using his cane to familiarize himself with his surroundings, using motion-censored alarms, throwing a flashbang and pretending to stun himself. Now that's comedy, baby. The man just personifies the word badass. If you guys are a fan of action like this, I would highly recommend watching Ipan with Donnie Yen. It is absolutely incredible, and the man just pushes the limit as to what you think is possible when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. I feel like it was just the inclusion of Donnie Yen's character's combat sequences that made Keanu's choreography stick out like a sore thumb at times. Still, everybody in the stunts department, holy moly, everybody involved with the stunt work in this movie, in this whole franchise, you all deserve to be commended and deserve so much more credit with what you all continue to accomplish in these movies. It is absolutely incredible. So now we're about to get into the epic use of camera and lighting, the cinematography. If you watch the series back to back from the first movie to the fourth, it's clear that the locations and the lightings go from the more gritty, realistic approach to just borderline fantastical. Some of these locations definitely look way too pretty than I'm sure the location would actually look in real life. I'm not complaining about that though. I love the way these locations look. Sometimes it can just be a little bit distracting of just how insanely pretty it is. And I will definitely make the claim though that this movie probably has the fanciest cinematography that we've seen in this whole franchise yet. The abundance of sources of light that was occurring with nearly every location, especially the interior night scenes. These locations look like they are just no longer of a narrative movie. It feels like at this point they're now just rigging lights for a techno music video instead of a narrative movie. I think it gives this franchise its own unique identity and its own unique style and feel. And we also expect John Wick to take us across the world. These locations are just beautiful to behold, with scenic vistas that counter the carnage that take place in them. Can always look forward to getting a world tour experience with John Wick when I'm just sitting on my ass. But now I'm gonna do the unthinkable. I'm gonna talk about the things I didn't like. In this beloved franchise and this already critically acclaimed and audience members just raving about how great it is movie, the elements that did make me do a double take and rethink certain events from the previous movies were that in story and specifically the lore and rules that were established in this world. Certain rules that were prevalent in the previous movies just did not get brought up here, and vice versa. Certain rules were created and we were hearing about these certain rules for the first time in this movie, but it doesn't make sense that they weren't brought up in the previous installments. Specifically the whole challenging the Marquis to one-on-one combat in order for John to get his freedom. Why was this brought up now from Winston when this could have easily come in handy in chapter 3 or even chapter 2? Oh, I know, because the real reason is because the screenwriters had to keep this franchise going. I get it. It did at times feel like it was way too convenient. And if you stop and rewatch all these movies back to back, you're certainly going to notice the inconsistencies in the rules here. Now, the breaking of these rules won't blatantly cancel out your suspension of disbelief, but if you're one who's a very nitpicky bitch, You're just gonna find those small details and just how repetitive these inconsistencies are with the loosey-goosey rules. So just how the spoilers foretold, this is the end of John Wick. Question mark? As of right now, it's kind of clear that the supporting characters that survived at this point are possibly going to get their own spin-off, because there's just no way in hell Lionsgate is going to cash in on this franchise yet. Definitely not with this movie already being on track to be the highest grossing John Wick movie to date. So the death of John, voluntarily choosing his fate with the duel against Kane, pretty appropriate that the only character that was plausible at taking out John Wick was a character that Donnie Yen plays, or I figured they just would have had Wick kill himself in the end. Fine. I'll do it myself. You just figure at this point since no one else can do it. Now, we did see him collapse over at the stairs in Paris, and we did see his tombstone in place. But is he truly dead? I think production intentionally made it open-ended and pretty ambiguous, with not too much concrete visual evidence that John is truly underneath the ground. And so far with these numbers, with this movie's opening, I wouldn't be surprised if they go ahead and defile John's grave to give us more. As usual with a bunch of milk franchises, I would rather they didn't. I think this was an organic conclusion to the character of John Wick. And as much as we tell ourselves that we would see endless upon endless amount of sequels of this franchise, I was one of those people claiming that it will just never get repetitive. You gotta stop lying to yourself, guys. Come on. Eventually it will get repetitive. Too much of a good thing, too much of a great thing, too much of an amazing thing even, will eventually sour. It will eventually lose that spark it once had for us. I'm sure each and every one of you can name at least one franchise that is definitely past its prime and continuing to pump out sequels for the sake of it. I feel like they should quit while they're ahead. Only time will tell if they will defile John's grave in order to pump out more sequels. I mean, Clancy Brown said it himself.
Am I really gonna defile this grave for money? Of course I am!
Now this score is interesting because I feel like this score may change depending on whether the studio will continue on with Wick's story or if they are actually going to make this be the actual conclusion for him. And if they're going to have to bring John back and have Keanu keep doing these movies because of ticket sales, I'm sorry, but I'm not big on that. I think that may drop this movie down to a 7 out of 10 for me then. But again, only time will tell. We shall see. If this truly is the end of this character, I will gladly praise a satisfying conclusion with a solid 8 out of 10. Unmatched stunts, choreography, and pyrotechnics with inconsistent rules in the established assassin world. Everyone love your dogs and treat them well. Everyone take care of your dogs and show them lots of love.